Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. How are you all? I hope that all of you are doing fine and staying safe. Our today topic is process scheduling. Previously, we started the operating systems chapter, and in this topic, we would like to learn how a process is scheduled on CPU. Now, what do I actually mean by this? First, we need to learn some important terms regarding this topic. Whenever I use the word process, I'm just actually mentioning a program which is being executed by the processor. So, there may be many programs installed on your hard drive, and few of them may be loaded into your RAM, and even fewer of them will move on to a processor to be executed. So when a program is being executed, we call it a process, and then operating system actually needs to schedule the processes in a way that the time of processor may be used efficiently. Now, right now, we are actually talking about a uniprocessor environment, an environment where there is only one processor and an operating system which can support multi-programming, and we want to run all those programs on that single processor. So operating system needs to make a decision that which process should get the time of processor. It's actually a time sharing environment. Processor's time is being shared among all the processes that are being executed. So operating system actually schedules all the processes based on different things. We are going to study the scheduling algorithms in the part 2 of this chapter, but I hope you get the idea that why processor scheduling is necessary. We have to schedule the time of processor among the different processes so that they get their fair share of time according to their requirement and their priority. Then, if we imagine a system where one process which is loaded to processor is using the processor's time and is not actually leaving the processor, would cause a lot of waste of our resources. Suppose you have loaded a program onto processor and now the program is running, but suddenly this program needs to wait for something. Maybe some input output operation needs to be completed. Maybe it is waiting for the response from the user or any other signal. In that case, that program should go on to the waiting state and some other program should take its place on the processor. So that processor's time should not be spent idly. So scheduling as itself is very important for us to use the time of our processor efficiently, as efficiently as possible. There is a specific data structure which is made when a program is loaded onto the memory. You remember that your hard drive is actually your storage area. So every program that you have installed in your operating system is actually stored on your hard drive. But when you try to run that, the program actually is shifted from the hard drive to your main memory, your RAM. When a program is shifted to RAM, a special kind of data structure is generated. That data structure is known as process control block or PCB. Taking a pause here, let's take a trip down to the memory lane. You have studied about the fetch, decode, and execute cycle in your O levels, and I think you have also studied that in your AS book as well. Now remember, you used to study about that whenever an interrupt is caused, the processor, whatever the processor is doing, it stops, saves the content of the registers, and then service the interrupt. Remember the interrupt service routines of the operating system, your initial introduction to the operating system architecture. You were told that when an interrupt is caused, processor actually stops the fetch, decode, and execute cycle and saves the contents of the register and then load the interrupts and service the interrupt. Now, where the processor saves those contents, this is where the process control block is the area, is a special kind of data structure inside your main memory where the contents of the program that was actually being executed before the interrupt was caused, the contents of that program were stored back in the RAM in the process control block. So when the processor will come back to that program, the processor will know where to start from. A process control block may store a lot of things. As I have mentioned, it's actually a data structure which stores everything relevant to the execution of the program. It has the process IDs, the state, the pointers, priority, program counter, CPU registers, a lot of other things. Now this block diagram which you are actually seeing is just one version of this. The process control block may store more fields than that. It can be a lot more detailed. In your books on the next levels of your education, you will see that this process control block is described in a lot more detail. Right now, we are just actually studying that at a level to get its better and need-based concept. So it might store the process ID, the ID allocated to the process itself, and the ID of the process which called the said process, the parent process. You know that some programs actually calls upon other programs. Some, for example, an operating system may call upon the utility programs to do some task. For example, you may use the disk defragment utility. So, or a program may call its subroutines. So, a process that calls another process is called the parent process. Then, what is the state of the process? Is it waiting? Is it running? It is terminated? In the next slides of our lecture, we are going to discuss about the different states that a process can exist. Then there are priorities and pointers. Some processes have the higher priority. For example, the operating system's own tasks always have the higher priority because the operating system's subroutines and processes actually are there to manage the whole computer system. So they have the higher priority. So what is the priority of the process? That is also stored in the process control block. You remember the fetch, decode, and execute cycle started with the program counter, sending the address to the memory address register. So the state of the program counter and CPU register is also saved in the process control block. So the processor actually knows where to get the address from. This is where the address is, this is where from address is sent to the program counter and the processor actually knows where to start executing the program, which line is to be executed first. And then program counter keeps pointing to the next lines. Then there may be some processes that are using input-output devices. For example, your calling software might need to use your webcam and your microphone and your speakers. So when you are doing that, there are some devices which are allocated to that process. So that IO information is also stored in the process control block. Then there is an accounting information about the process as well. Means how much time of CPU and the user have been spent on the process, how many cycles of CPU have the process consumed. All the statistics of the process are stored in the process control block as well. In summary, this data structure is actually recording all the information related to the execution of the process. Then we have to study about the different process schedulers. Now remember, a process means a program has to move three different places. It was installed in hard drive. We have to load it into the RAM. Then we have to move it to the processor from the RAM. Then there is one more case that if your RAM is overcrowded, if your RAM is full, you have to move some of the data of the RAM, some of the contents of the RAM back to the hard drive so that you have some space in your RAM. So there are three types of transfers that the process has to face. And for that, we have three types of process schedulers. The first one is the long-term or high-level scheduler. This is actually the scheduler which is responsible of shifting of the program from the secondary storage from the hard disk drive into the main memory. Then another process scheduler, which is also called a swapping scheduler, is responsible of getting the process back to hard disk and then back to RAM. This is done when the RAM is actually full and we have to free some space in the RAM, or we have to load more programs, so we actually move some of the data of main memory back to hard disk, and if the data is required again, we move it back to the main memory. So that's actually is done by a medium term scheduler, also called a swapping scheduler. Lastly, the short term or low level scheduler, which is going to be the main focus of our lecture, this one and its next part, that this is actually responsible of shifting the processes from the RAM to the CPU and back. So you have all your three scheduler. Long-term scheduler is responsible from hard disk to RAM, shifting the program from hard disk to RAM. Medium-term scheduler handles actually the RAM. If the RAM is full, it might move some of the programs back to hard disk. If those programs are needed again, it will move those programs back to RAM. And then it's short-term scheduler, which sends the program from RAM to the CPU. And the module that actually sends the program to the CPU to be executed is called dispatcher. There is excuse that heading, it should have been the differences between the scheduler. The heading should not have been long-term scheduler. It's actually about the differences between all three of them. So as you can see, the long term is also called the job scheduler. Short term is CPU scheduler, and the medium term is also called the swapping scheduler, because it's always doing the swapping of the program from RAM to hard drive and hard drive to RAM in case of RAM is getting overcrowded. The long-term scheduler has less speed, and the medium-term scheduler has medium speed, but the short-term has to have the fastest speed because it has to work with the processor. And the long-term process scheduler actually selects the processes from the hard drive, from the pool of all the programs, and loads them into memory. The medium term actually helps you to send processes back to memory, and the short term scheduler actually sends the processes to the execution state, to the processor. And there is one little point again, that it only selects the processes that is in ready state. This is the second time we are referencing to something called a state of the process. That if a processor is in ready state, only then it will be sent for the execution to the processor. So this brings us to the states of the process. Now, there are a few states in which a process can exist. First one, a process is being created, a new process. Its process control block is being made. In that state, the process is new. Then, when the PCB has been made and the process has everything ready for it, it's ready to be assigned to the processor, it is ready for execution, it has all the necessary data it needs to be executed, it's in ready state. Then the process is sent to the processor, and then it is in running state. It means it is being executed. The processor is actually working on the process. A process which is in running state can also be switched to the waiting state. As I have mentioned earlier, there might be some IO operation. Maybe you are playing something from your CD and you're waiting the CD to be read. I don't know if you people still uses CD, but still, it's a valid example. But I think in a couple of more years, no one is actually going to know what I'm talking about when I mention the word compact disc. Then sometime the process is waiting for a response, a signal from the user, or maybe waiting for a file to be available. In that case, it will be switched from running to waiting state. The process will keep waiting, and while that process is waiting, the processor will move on to some other process and start running that. And after the process has finished its work, its all statements have been executed, then the process will be sent to terminated, finished state. So these are 5 states in which a process can exist. This is another attempt to elaborate the concept. You can see that starting from the top left corner, you can see that a process is created as a new process, and then it is admitted to the ready queue and it's waiting. From the ready, it can move on to the running process, running state, sorry. And from running, it can go to the waiting state if it needs to wait for some other operation to be completed, some data to be fetched. Then after that data have been fetched, then it will go back to the ready state, and as soon as it gets the processor again, it will be switched back to running state. And after it has completed its execution, it will move to terminated state. And terminated state would mean that the execution of the process has been completed. The scheduler dispatch will be responsible for, or simply we call it dispatcher, will be responsible for sending a process from ready to running state. An interrupt will cause the process to go to running state from ready state. And from running to waiting state, there can be some input output or other event wait which can cause a process to switch from running to waiting state. So this is how a process states can work interchangeably. This is how process can switch state from start from being created to being terminated. In our next discussion, we would move on to the short-term scheduler actually, and we would learn about the preemptive and non-preemptive scheduling algorithms, and we would learn how some of the scheduling algorithms work. Until then, I would hope that you would uh, ask me a lot of questions about this lecture and prepare it with the help of this video and the material content provided on your textbook. This was actually the first part of the processor scheduling topic. We will have the next part in our next meeting. Until then, take care of yourself. Allah Hafiz.